The year is 1969. Richard Nixon has just been inaugurated as the 37th President of the United States. The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy are still fresh in the minds of the American people. The first U.S. troop withdrawals from Vietnam are made. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin are the first men to walk on the moon. Anti-war sentiments are fervent. The Zodiac Killer dominates news headlines, and the first draft lottery in the U.S. is held since World War II. Meanwhile, in a small advertising office in Santa Monica, California, Daniel Ellsberg begins copying a top-secret report which would change the communication world forever. In 1967, a team of analysts working for the Department of Defense prepared a highly classified study of U.S. involvement in Vietnam. Daniel Ellsberg, who worked as a strategic analyst at the Department of Defense, had been an early supporter of U.S. involvement in Vietnam and had worked on the preparation of this study. By 1969, however, Ellsberg had come to believe that the war in Vietnam was unwinnable. He also believed that the information contained in the Pentagon Papers about U.S. decision-making regarding Vietnam should be more widely available to the American public. Together with his friend, Anthony Russo, Ellsberg sought out to copy and expose the top-secret report to give the American public more information about the Vietnam War. Some of the most fatal information in the Pentagon Papers indicated that the administration of John F. Kennedy had actively helped overthrow and assassinate the South Vietnamese president in 1963. The report also contradicted official U.S. government pronouncements about the intensive bombing of North Vietnam, which the report stated as having no real impact on the enemy's will to fight. After spending 2 months secretly photocopying large sections of the report during nights and weekends, Ellsberg approached members of Congress about the Pentagon Papers, but none were interested. In February 1971, Ellsberg discussed the study with the New York Times reporter Neil Sheehan and gave 43 of the volumes to him in March. Before publication, the New York Times sought legal advice. The paper's regular outside counsel, Lord Day and Lord, advised against publication. But in-house counsel James Goodale prevailed with his argument that the press had a First Amendment right to publish information significant to the people's understanding of their government's policy. We sat down for an interview with James Goodale to better understand his perspective.
Yeah, this is a question more specifically about the Pentagon Papers. In your opinion, was there anything that actually threatened national security published within the Pentagon Papers?
No.
No.
Now, I want to tell you something about national security. I've looked at every leaked case in the history of the United States, examples, not law cases. And there's never been one example where a leak provably damaged national security.
Most lawyers, they tend to play things safe, and then they tell their clients to play things safe. But as the New York Times general counsel, you pushed for the Pentagon Papers to be published. Why is that?
I just didn't think that a jury was going to penalize somebody for publishing a history of the Vietnam War when the country wanted to know what that history was because young men were dying. To be a good lawyer, you have to be common sense and use judgment. So I added it all up and I said, I just don't see how we're going to lose, number one. Number two, this is great stuff that everyone should know about, and that ought to carry the day.
Lord Day and Lord, they were the outside counsel for the New York Times, right?
Right.
And usually you would hand off the litigation to them, but they kind of quit on this case. What was it like when you were forced to kind of create your own legal team to fight this battle?
Well, you would have thought I was scared shitless, but I wasn't. When they dropped out, I didn't get angry. I said, well, in a way, good riddance. Sometimes you get in really difficult situations. Instead of getting scared, all of a sudden your blood gets colder. I know, I think it probably happens to a lot of people.
The theme of this year's National History Day is communication.
Right.
How important do you think whistleblowers like Daniel Ellsberg and reporters like Neil Sheehan are in communicating the truth to the American people?
It's very important for people like Sheehan and Ellsberg to let the public know the truth about what the government is doing, particularly when the government is endangering and killing young people, which is what the government was doing in the Pentagon Papers case. And so if you don't have whistleblowers, the government will cover up everything that they're doing as best they can, and you can never find out what the truth is.
President Nixon at first planned to do nothing about the publication of the study since it embarrassed the Johnson and Kennedy administrations rather than his. But Henry Kissinger convinced the president that not opposing the publication set a negative precedent for future secrets. The administration argued Ellsberg and Russo were guilty of a felony under the Espionage Act of 1917 because they had no authority to publish classified documents. After failing to persuade the New York Times to voluntarily cease publication, on June 14th, Attorney General John N. Mitchell and Nixon obtained a federal court injunction forcing the New York Times to cease publication after 3 articles. The newspaper appealed the injunction, and the case New York Times Co. versus United States quickly rose through the U.S. legal system. On June 18th, the Washington Post began publishing its own series of articles based upon the Pentagon Papers. That very same day, Assistant U.S. Attorney General William Rehnquist asked the Washington Post to cease publication. After the paper refused, Rehnquist sought an injunction in U.S. District Court, but the judge refused. The government appealed the decision, and on June 26, the Supreme Court agreed to hear it jointly with the New York Times case. In the now famous case of New York Times Co. versus United States, the Times and the Washington Post joined forces to fight for the right to publish. On June 30th, the Supreme Court decided on a 6-3 vote that a prior restraint could not be imposed on publication of the Pentagon Papers. In a brief opinion, the whole court noted that the government carries a heavy burden of showing justification for the imposition of such a restraint, and stated that the government had failed to meet that burden. In order to get a better understanding of this case and its significance, we sat down for an interview with David Cole, an expert on Supreme Court law concerning national security.
Now, and do you agree with the Supreme Court's decision to uphold the right of the New York Times and Washington Post to publish the material of the Pentagon Papers?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the claim that it was, first of all, the claim that, that the national security would be undermined by its release was a pretty weak claim. What it actually demonstrated was a number of, things that were embarrassing to our government.
Do you agree with Justice Berger in his dissent? He argued that the decision was rushed and that there should have been a detailed study on the effects of the publication of this material before the court came to a decision.
I think the circumstances were such that the decision to some degree had to be rushed in the sense that the papers had these things. Some of the papers were in fact being published, so it wasn't like they could just take a lot of time to decide the matter. And I'm not sure at the end of the day, I don't think there's any real question that the information did not undermine our national security. Some secrets deserve to remain secrets, absolutely, but the overclassification of information in our society, means I think the Supreme Court got it right. And what New York Times means going forward is this is really a matter for negotiation between the press and the government.
And then last question. I saw someone else give you this question in another interview, and I just want to see how you respond. So the New York Times never acknowledged that Daniel Ellsberg was the source. Can you confirm or deny his involvement?
That's a good question. I never knew.
Yeah.
In fact, to this day, no one has told me. But there's been so much that has come out about Daniel Ellsberg and what he did that you'd have to be pretty dumb not to figure out it was Daniel Ellsberg. And secondly, he's called me and we've talked. And so I hereby confirm he was the source.